Hi, my name is Vasily Tolstoy. I am a member of programming committee of the Linux-16 conference, at which we are now, and I'm talking with Tycho Andersen. Hi, Tycho.
Hello.
Tycho is the speaker of our conference. So, can you talk to our listeners and viewers, say something about yourself? Who you are, where you're working. Supposedly everybody sees it already, but
Yeah.
let's pretend we do not.
Okay.
And what you're doing there?
Sure, yeah. My name is Tycho Andersen. I'm an engineer at Canonical working on Linux containers. I worked at Canonical for about 3.5 years, and I have mostly worked on LXC, LXD, and the checkpoint restore functionality both in user space and in the kernel. So, yeah.
Sounds great. Your talk was about the live migration of the LSD containers. Can you briefly talk about that? What it was about?
Sure. So the talk goes over what basically from when you in the command line type LXC move a container from here to there, what all happens. So there's a lot of things that happen. Both the file system also gets moved. LXD manages your files and everything, the container's file system. But then also there's a lot of stuff that happens in the actual process tree of the container that's very interesting in terms of how we grab the information from one side and send it over and restore it on the other side. And so the talk goes through basically what happens when you actually execute that command as to how it's all negotiated and.
Can you tell us, is the problem solved in general, or
No.
it still doesn't move?
No.
So you're working on a non-working software.
Yeah.
Cheater.
Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, they cannot move containers. They were cheating all the time.
Yeah, this is a good point actually. The problem space is huge. You know, you have to checkpoint everything in the kernel. There's so many system calls that can put arbitrary amounts of state into the kernel, and you have to examine all of that and reconstruct it correctly on the other side. And you know, we have a subset that works for a lot of workloads, but not for everything. We do sell a product that you can pay us to solve a particular problem if your workload has something, and that's how we're doing it now, is on a case-by-case basis for customers. But the problem is huge, and there's a lot of stuff to work on. So if people are interested in this, definitely get on the mailing list and stuff. Yeah, it's you're right. There's a lot of stuff to do. So.
Yes. Okay. Can you, from a very subjective point of view, can you tell us, from your opinion, what most important has happened in Linux and the open software world in the last maybe 2 years?
So in the last 2 years is interesting.
Recently, which means 2 years.
I would say there's two things that I'm very excited about. One, of course, is containers. I make my living doing containers, and that's big for me. It's also a very cool technology just in terms of the sort of performance and density benefits you get from containers. On the user space side of containers, there's lots of interesting things going on in terms of the OCI, and they have a packaging format. And then in the system containers world, we are now sort of unified on CREU, checkpoint restore and user space, this tool to do live migration. And so I think there's a lot more rapid progress being made there than was being made before. The other project that I'm really interested in just on a personal level is eBPF.
Yes.
Right now, eBPF, and I don't do anything with this professionally, but just right now, eBPF is it's very new, and it's being used mostly for networking now. But I think eBPF has the opportunity to be used in lots of areas in the kernel that have not been explored yet because it's just so new. And I think it offers a lot of. I mean, you basically can install an arbitrary program into the kernel and run it in kernel space, so you avoid this whole trapping back and forth problem, which opens up, I think, a lot of speed improvements and other interesting applications for this in the future. So,
it's very interesting. Personally, I never thought of eBPF of anything else that the solely networking thing.
But like they have for example, they have users already in the kernel outside of this in tracing, and then also like seccomp, for example, compiles to an eBPF program. You can't insert a seccomp eBPF program. They have another language that they use, the classic one, and they compile that to this other language, and then so they have internal users in the kernel, and I think that's kind of just the tip. I think there's much more there. So, yeah.
Great. By the way, do you know, do the eBPF currently have the provide a form of virtual networking device to which the packets are deviated by certain criteria? They have the plans. Had the plans. I heard about it in year 15, but I don't know what's going on now.
So I don't know. I think there's. So what I know now is that they're talking to hardware vendors, and they're implementing hardware support for eBPF and stuff like that, but I'm not sure if they're exposing some network device directly to user space that you can program with eBPF. I don't know if you have to attach it to a driver of already existing hardware or not. But there are, hardware vendors are very interested in this, and they're doing hardware offload for eBPF programs, actually. So they have hardware that implements the eBPF instruction set and will do it.
It's absolutely great.
Yeah.
And what do you think? What would happen next? What do you expect to happen in short future?
I think the containers functionality, like it's there and people are using it now, but there's a lot of things that still need to be solved. For example, just a minor one is time namespaces. Right now, there's one system time.
Yes, I remember that I proposed the time namespace on the conference, and the guys contacted me. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a minute of fame for me, because I was. They told me that it is the second craziest idea of all the conference to have the time namespace. Who wants it? And now you see the community has adopted it.
It's important, and for example, things like checkpoint restore need this, because you can do things where, like with timer file descriptors, they can count like some amount of time from an arbitrary point, but the way that they do that is in the kernel they count like jiffies or something. And you need to namespace this because you can't change that number on the host, of course, because you'll change the host concept of time. And so I think we have to have this. I just don't know when it will get added, but I think there is interest, at least by our community, in having that.
I absolutely agree with that. Well, if I'll start to talk about that, we'll finish interviewing in that direction and begin to that direction. Stepping one step off and switching to the wider lens camera, what hardware things, geek gadgets, social ideas, whatever, things in the wider world has touched you recently? What you can mark, this is important one.
In terms of like wearable computing, I know that there's been a lot of interest in watches and things, but one of the most interesting things for me has been the Fitbits. So I'm an amateur athlete and I do a lot of bike riding myself, but people often ask me like, how do you get fit? And one of the basic ways is just accountability, and you start out. And so just a little device with an accelerometer that talks over Bluetooth to your phone is like enough to get a lot of people out and exercising, which I think is just a cool like piece of technology. In terms of other geek gadgets, I am still infatuated with phones. All of the things that they can do now, and bandwidth. Like maybe someday we can all just use our phones for internet instead of having a separate internet line. That would be nice. I think VR headsets look really cool. I've tried a few at some conferences. There's a few different companies now making them, and that looks pretty fun. I think there's a lot of just cool gadgetry that will be around for a long time.
We are at the conference, which is more or less understood at this time, I guess. So what is your opinion? What's the reason of existence for a conference? Why they're important?
So one of the things that I like about conferences, and this one has been good in that respect as well, is you can talk to people who you're interested in working with. So a lot of the Linux community, obviously I'm not Russian, And I know the reason that I'm here is because I know some Russians who I've worked with for the last 3 or so years. And conferences like this are a chance to get to meet people. You send a lot of emails, you send patches over email or whatever, and it's almost as much about like going and trying. Last night I tried some Georgian food with these guys, and it's almost as much about that. And over dinner you talk about technical ideas. What are your company's plans for the next 6 months? What are our company's plans for the next 6 months? What can we work on together? So it's that much as much as the talks are very nice, and you learn about things you wouldn't know about. I think the hallway track, as people call it, is honestly the best part. So
can't say better. And regarding the specifics, what specific conferences would you recommend our viewers to attend, if possible, or at least to see the materials from the videos?
Yeah, so Linux Plumbers, I think this was hosted 2 weeks ago, is always a great conference. They have it's very technical talks. So I really enjoy going to that conference every year, and there's a lot of, some of the talks are not even talks, or they'll have like micro conferences, and the micro conferences are just basically big discussions among the developers of that particular kernel subsystem or user space thing, whatever. Like for example, there was 2 micro conferences that I attended at the Linux Plumbers 2 weeks ago. One of them was we had a special micro conference for containers, and users of containers got together with the authors of container orchestration systems. Yeah, and
it's very important.
Yeah, and you hear people's pain points, and then you can take those pain points back to your company and say, look, like we really need to do this feature or that feature. So that's very nice. But then also just the content at Linux Plumbers is very technical in nature, and there's less it's less advertising or my company does this or whatever, and a lot more just here's the kernel, here's interesting problems. So that's a conference that I really love going to every year. LinuxCon and ContainerCon can be the same way. I would say Plumbers is definitely the highest conference on my list, but the LinuxCon and ContainerCon, they have one for each for Asia, North America, and Europe. So the content varies because they have 3 different conferences, but those can be also very good as well. I presented at those and talked with a lot of people there. So all of those are really a chance to just go meet the people that are working on the things that you're interested in, and the people that you work with and that you've sent emails to but have never spoken to, and it's very nice. Having a face makes a big difference. So.
Sure it is. And the usual personal question, which in your case with your polo shirts becomes extremely sensitive. What operation system perchance do you use on your home computer?
So of course I use Ubuntu on all my home computers. I've been in
Ubuntu, guys. You can stop watching here. He said the correct words. Now we can say the truth. They disappear.
So actually I've been an Ubuntu user since 2007, which was pretty early on in the Ubuntu lifetime. Before that, I was a Debian user, and it was mostly just Ubuntu kernel had patches that I needed for my desktops and laptops that the Debian kernel didn't have, and so that's why I started using it. And then I just there's a lot of things that Ubuntu does, mostly kernel work, but also some user space work that's just very nice, and things just work out of the box. And so I've used Ubuntu. I guess this is 2016, so almost 10 years. But I've only worked at the company for 3.5. So the question is, when I get fired from Ubuntu, what operating system will I use? I don't know.
Keep him. So if you're still watching, keep him.
Yeah.
So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye-bye.